Hi everyone, and welcome back to another week of DearPiggy's JavaScript tutorials. In this video, we are going to be working on our DOM elements. So let's jump right in. In this first slide, let's take a look and kind of really introduce ourselves to what DOM elements actually are. So with JavaScript, right, before we've always been printing things to the console. We've been working a lot with the back end, but I think in reality, it would be a lot more cool and fun if we could start using the web page a little bit more, right? And while the web page is always using HTML, CSS, we can use DOM elements to manipulate the HTML and CSS so that our JavaScript can appear on the web page as well. So when using DOM elements, there are several ways that we can do this. We can find HTML elements by ID, by their tag name, by their class name, CSS selectors, and HTML object collections. Now, this stuff, I know, guys, sounds really confusing right now because we are JavaScript people, right? We're not quite fluent yet, but we're getting there. And this stuff, a lot of it is HTML, CSS. So today we're going to be working on finding HTML elements by ID and manipulating the elements by their ID. But before we get started, we've got to learn a little bit more about HTML. Because again, JavaScript, HTML, CSS are all so connected. So in order for us to really make this work, we got to have some HTML, CSS basics. So let's go to a new tab, go to Replit. We're going to have to log in. Oh, I'm already logged in here, okay? So let's create our new REPL, choose HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and create the REPL. Now, like before, when we come into our first web page here, we see that it says index.html, script.js, style.css. Usually, we're always working in this page, but today we're going to mix things up a little bit. We're going to be working entirely on the HTML. So we can ignore the rest of these two for now. We're going to be focusing on this baby right here for today. Okay, so let me zoom in a little bit and show you guys what's going on here. This is sort of the structure for our HTML doc. And in HTML, we have our JavaScript on this line of code. Now, in this line of code, we're saying it's linking it to the external JavaScript code, which is saying that the JavaScript code is going to be in here. Now, since we want everything to be on HTML for now, in a second, we're going to be getting rid of all this part, and we're going to be moving this script tag around a little bit. So I know you guys might have noticed that HTML is looking a little bit different right now, right? We see these weird angle brackets, and we also see a lot of slashes and different colors, right? And those are all great observations, so let's kind of explain what this is. Let's put a few reminders right now. So HTML, CSS, the most important thing to remember is that every time you open a tag, you always need to close it. So I'm going to do an HTML comment right now. You guys don't really need to know this, but it's right there. And then we're going to say, every time you so-called open an HTML tag, you have to close it. So we're going to be referring back to our little like notes list every time over here. Another thing, these tags are called HTML elements. So thinking back to our PowerPoint slide over here, when we say we were manipulating HTML elements by their ID, we're essentially kind of going to look at their tag name as well. So with these two reminders, we're going to take a look back at our HTML, and over here we see that, let's take this body tag, for example. You'll see body and then \body. This is a full HTML tag. The element is body, or in this case, it's not a really great example because this is more of the structure, but we see that we've opened it by doing the angle brackets and then the tag name, and we've closed it by using angle brackets, a slash, and then the tag name. So this is really, really important to remember. That's just a little bit of the basic parts. Now let's introduce one of the tags that we'll be using today. We will be using the P tag quite a bit. So the P tag is a paragraph tag used for some text. So let's go ahead and do this. P, every time you open a tag, you need to close it, right? So technically, your paragraph text should go here, right? And so by typing in here, when we run our code, we'll see on the website, we get some text on the page, which means that this paragraph tag has successfully worked, right? Now, when we manipulate our HTML, CSS with the JavaScript, we're not going to be having any text over here because we don't want the HTML to interfere at all with the JavaScript. So now that we've kind of looked at this paragraph here, and we've kind of gotten used to a little bit, just a little bit of how HTML is working, let's kind of get started with the actual part. So since in this video we're going to be manipulating the DOM elements with the ID, we have to assign an ID to the tag. Now take a look carefully, guys. Your text is in between these tags, right? Now take a look at your first beginning tag. Now come into it, inside here, so right next to the P, but still inside the angle brackets, you're going to say ID is equal to, and then you can give your ID name, and then you end it with the quotation marks. What I've just done over here is I've taken my paragraph tag and I've assigned it an ID. And these IDs are very helpful in JavaScript because we can use them to kind of manipulate and see how our elements are going to work. Here's how I want you guys to think of your IDs. Let me write this again. So think of your IDs as names for your element. So our paragraph element here has a name called ID name, or if we want it to make more sense, we can call it Sunny. So it has a name called Sunny. So now every time we want to do something specific in JavaScript, we can say, go find the paragraph tag that has an ID name called Sunny. And then that way it'll make our lives a lot easier. So by classifying it with a name, we can now use it specifically. So that's exactly why we've made an ID here. And IDs are pretty simple to create, right? So now, like I promised, we're going to be changing this up a little bit. So we'll go ahead, take all of this src equals script.js part out. So now you should just have two empty script tags, one opening script tag and one closing script tag, right? So we're going to take this, and since we were going to put the JavaScript on its own, we're going to take it out of the body and put it back in. Oops, I have to turn on my clipboard. Why can't I copy? There we go. Perfect. So now we see here that our script tag is below our body tag. So now all of our JavaScript, all the JavaScript will go in here instead of on the external sheet. So now we're going to essentially replace this script.js with this tag, and all of our JavaScript is going to come inside of here. Great, so now we can actually get started now. I know, but we needed to get these basics done, right? We needed to understand what all these brackets and weird things meant, right? So let's come over back here. We've gone over HTML, we've gone over tags, IDs, yep, we've done all of that. Now let's go ahead and see how we use inner HTML. Before, we would also always use the function console.log to print to the console. And by using these DOM elements now, we can print these directly to the web page. So how we do that is we go to our JavaScript and we say document.getElementById, which is a function, by the way, guys. And then in the parentheses, we're going to give the ID name, and then we're going to put .innerHTML. And then we're going to put whatever we want to print out to the website. So I know this looks very, very confusing. Let's break this down a little bit step by step. What does every word mean? Well, This document over here, once you're taking a look at this picture, is saying go to the document, whether it's your HTML or whatever it is, go to your entire document and then find the element that has the ID name of whatever you put in the parentheses. So getElementById is the function that finds the element with the ID name. So remember how we said how the ID was kind of like giving the element a name? That's exactly what we're doing. We're saying go to the document and search for the element that has the name Sunny. And then finally, inner HTML is essentially just a couple of words, couple of letters that you add on that is saying that we need to print this out onto the HTML page. So let's go ahead and use it, and then we'll explain it a couple more times after that, because I know this is confusing. But after you do it so many times, it'll become like second nature, I promise. So even though this is confusing right now, the more you do it, the more you practice, the more you write it, the more you'll understand it. And one day, you'll just completely break through that barrier, and it'll all make sense, right? So let's go ahead and do this. We're going to say, go look through the entire document, and then we're going to find the element that has the ID name called Sunny. And it's right here, by the way. We're not playing hide and seek because it's right there. We've on purposely named it Sunny. So we say getElementById, right? Document.getElementById. And then inside here, we are going to say, what is the ID name? The ID name is Sunny. Correct, right? This ID we've called Sunny. Now we need to get rid of this HTML text because we want the JavaScript code to really be put on the website. We don't want to see any letters from the HTML. And finally, we're going to say .inner HTML, which is saying here is what you should put for your HTML content. And then we can just add two numbers, 2 + 9, and then end it with your semicolon here. Now, let's run this code really fast and see what happens. We run our code, and then my Replit is not being very great today. So let me copy this code and reload the page here. So reload. There we go. Control-Alt, Control-V, perfect. And let's run the code, and we get 11. Perfect. So what have I just done here? Instead of printing to the console, which your console is this dark navy blue space down here, we can just ignore that for now because we're not going to be using it at all. We have printed directly to the website, directly to our make-believe website here, which is exactly what we were going for. And now let's break this down one more time. We have a paragraph element in the HTML. This is HTML code, okay? Anything that's outside of this script tag is all HTML code. The only thing that's JavaScript code is going to be inside of your script tag over here. So we have an HTML element. We gave it an ID so that later we would be able to find it specifically. We gave that ID and we called it Sunny, right? We could call it whatever we want, actually. We can call it broccoli if we wanted to. Why did I think of broccoli? I'm not even such a big fan of broccoli. I don't know. So we gave our paragraph element an ID. So like, think of it this way. If you're a student in your school, you might have a student ID. And using that ID, your school probably classifies you and they can find you using your student ID. And that's exactly what this is. This is just an element ID. And then this part is where it gets a little bit trickier. We say document.getElementById. Document is just, it has to be there, guys. This is just one of those things that just has to be there. And what it's saying is that you have to look through the entire document. And then the main function that we're using is .getElementById. Like its name says, we're going to look for the element with a specific ID. And now in the parentheses, in the quotation marks, we have to put the ID name. Since we changed this ID name from Sunny to broccoli, we have to put broccoli over here as well. So getElementById, find the element that has the ID called broccoli, and then for its HTML. What .inner HTML is saying is it's just saying this is what you should print out for the HTML. Print out 2 + 9, which should get 11. We wanted to switch this up a bit. We can say, yay, we have successfully, I can't spell that. We have printed broccoli to the console, to the web page. There we go. So now, when we run our code, we see that we get, yay, we have printed broccoli to the web page. So from this, guys, from this video, what we've learned is that we can assign an ID to an HTML tag, and we can name it whatever we would like. Then, by using that ID, we can take it and in the JavaScript, specifically find the tag, the HTML element with that ID name, and then specify what it should print out. So that's what we've done essentially, guys. Using this DOM element, we have printed directly to the web page instead of to the console. If you didn't understand that, go think about, maybe take a look in your brain and think about, what does getElementById mean? Like, what does this function name mean? I think this function name was named really well, surprisingly. I mean, you don't really get functions that are named that great, but I think this function name was one of the things that helped me really understand it. Find the element by its ID. That's essentially what it's saying. So I think that's it for this video. In this video, we went over DOM elements. We kind of went into the basics of HTML so that we could work with JavaScript. And then finally, we used the function getElementById and inner HTML in order to print something directly to the web page. Now, this is one of the more important videos, but it's totally okay if you didn't understand it, because we will be working on this almost every single video. We will be using this idea and we will be practicing it over and over and over. So I think before long, you guys are going to be pros at this, so it's nothing to worry about. That's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to be working on functions. Yep. So another very important topic. Again, the next video might be slightly easier because functions are more of a thing that people understand from all sorts of different coding languages. But again, guys, JavaScript is one of the harder languages to learn, but you guys have got this, okay? We're going to be doing this over and over. You'll be pros at it by the end of this course. Bye, guys. Thank you.